Welcome to the Big Cheese AI podcast. I am your host, and my name is Sean. I think I said that twice.
Yes.
I'm here with Brandon.
Hello, everybody.
Jacob,
Hi.
as usual.
Hey.
The CTO. And we have a special guest today, Joel Minton.
Hey, guys.
He is in the semiconductor industry, in the supply chain space, which that is today's topic, which is a little bit
Exciting.
less nerdy, more businessy, but kind of all the more interesting because in order to do all this stuff that now we are trying to do, it takes a lot more CPU and computing. And people don't really think about that, right? Like you have the new refresh cycle happening with the iPhones and all that. They're advertising different chips in the M4 and the first in AI. I have my AI-enabled M4 chip in my iPad here. Does it really take more to do all this stuff than what we had before? Let's start with that.
So yes, obviously, right? It's a lot of horsepower to do all of this AI stuff. But what's kind of funny is like when if you just kind of take it on face value and you look at kind of like the market, everybody pretty much just thinks it's all Nvidia. That Nvidia is pretty much the ruler. That's where all your stocks should be, or all your money in your stocks should be. Like it's all Nvidia. But the reality is, and we were just talking about it, is that people might be surprised to know that Nvidia doesn't actually manufacture any of these chips. Now they design them, and they design really great ones. They have a lot of things, but there's actually one specific company that I think when we'll be talking about them, and I'm not going to say the acronym because my dyslexic ass is going to butcher it. I'll let you say it. That actually is coming out to be the 5 billion pound gorilla in the industry that pretty much rules everything right now.
Yeah. So if you look at just in generally what's going on, you have to manufacture chips. And this came up during COVID, right? Like a lot of the companies started winding down a lot of their output and their manufacturing, and it created a lot of bottlenecks throughout the world because everything needs chips now. Like you need a chip to start your car, right? It was, I don't even know how many chips are in modern vehicles, but they're just sticking chips.
Over 1,000.
Over 1,000.
1,000?
Over 1,000. Yeah.
Wow.
Like 10 years ago, there was like my wife's car, 2012, 40 chips maybe, like Windows.
Yeah.
Now, like a Tesla probably has 2,000 plus.
That's why my car dealer, when I bought a car a couple years ago, they were like really grilling me on the insurance or the warranties.
Yeah,
They're like,
tech warranty.
now your mirror has 30 chips, and I was like, I'm not buying that shit.
Yeah. And they can't ship a car if it's missing a single one of those, 2,000 chips. So that's,
Right.
that's
One of our clients is the United Auto Workers Union, and they have the Louisville assembly plant and the Kentucky truck plant down in Kentucky. And during COVID, they had stops on a lot of work just because they could get steel, all day long, but they couldn't get chips. And so their manufacturing lines were stuck. And obviously, like, I don't know how you think about that from a product design standpoint. We basically bottlenecked ourselves and have become dependent on these chips, and I don't even know how to explain it, but like,
well, why did that happen though? Just out of kind of curiosity, like what with COVID actually stopped our ability to make and produce these chips?
It was really just supply and demand. So no one anticipated the surge in demand, right? You had all these people going home. Like my company sent entire call centers home, gave them a laptop, accessories. So you had more people buying consumer electronics. The data centers had to have more compute to support all the teams and Zoom meetings. People were buying more video game consoles. Everyone was just sitting at home,
computing.
Right.
The chip manufacturers actually were assuming a drop off in demand.
Right.
They lowered inventory.
Well, that's what happened with a lot of the economics of COVID is that people reduced their output, but the actual demand in certain places, such as chips, such as bandwidth, such as whatever, dramatically increased.
So
Go ahead,
that
Jacob.
the demand side went up. They thought it was going to go down. And also the supply side went down because they cut it. But did they also have issues just like getting people to go to work? Like, wasn't that a big?
They shut
I
down
remember COVID, right?
Yeah, they shut down fabs.
I mean, in China, you couldn't even leave your house.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right.
In China's where they do a lot of the assembly, like the
final assembly.
Okay. And Taiwan's where they do a lot of the actual like
Chip
hardcore
manufacturing.
Yeah.
You said fab.
Yep.
Well, could you?
Yeah. So think of the chip industry or semiconductor industry into two kind of like sides. There's the chip design, which is Nvidia. They don't actually manufacture anything. That's AMD, that's Qualcomm. Apple and Microsoft actually design their own chips now and just send them straight to manufacturers. So you have chip designers, then you have chip manufacturers. That's TSMC. That's Samsung. That's the company I work for. Intel is like one of the few companies that still does both. They design and they manufacture, but you have to kind of split that in the way you think of it. Because I think in popular media, they just sort of use them interchangeably.
Oh, if I Googled it for prep of the show, I Googled top chip manufacturers. Nvidia was always number one. And what you're saying is they are a designer, not a manufacturer.
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah. Higher margins.
Yeah.
Which, their campus is very nice compared to like a manufacturing office. And that's why they're doing really well too.
And most of the design of chips is operated within the United States. Is that correct?
Right.
Okay.
I mean, it's kind of wild though if you really think about what Nvidia has done in terms of the value that they've created for their company, and they don't actually manufacture.
Yeah,
they're like a design studio.
So I think it's important to understand the paradigm between other countries and the United States of America, and it doesn't really have to do with anything besides just the climate and the culture of our country. Our culture is creative. It's everything we do is we think up stuff. And then people from the entire world, they're like, I want to go to America because I'm going to be able to be creative and think up stuff.
All right.
And remind me later, because I want to touch on the Arizona plants that they're the Taiwanese chip manufacturing company.
Mm-hmm.
They're having issues in Arizona because of the culture shock and culture change. So
yeah, so it's a really good story, this supply chain of the semiconductor industry. Right? Because you have Americans designing and thinking up all this stuff. And then you have the suppliers, Japan, Germany, Netherlands, right? Of supplying these raw materials. You have Taiwan, which is manufacturing all this stuff. You have assembly in China. You have this, it reflects kind of like all these different things about, but Nvidia, Apple, they're just really, really smart. But all they're doing is sending a spec.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. To one supplier.
Right.
So that kind of sets a stage for the story that we have to tell, which is, and you guys stay with me and ask, and let's just kind of go through it together. But there's what do you call it? The 400-pound gorilla, the elephant in the room, the company, and that's TSMC.
Right.
So there's a company in Taiwan.
Taiwan Semiconductor Manufacturing Company?
Yes.
Yep.
Correct. In Taiwan, the reason why it's named Taiwan is because initially in 1987, when the company was created, 50% of the money was put up by the Taiwan government. The Taiwan government decided, hey, we are going to try to raise the standard of living for our people. And so they took billions of dollars and tried to figure out how to do that, and it worked. It worked. And there's this guy. Go ahead, Joe.
It was an agricultural island, right?
Yeah.
How it shifted from that to the largest chip manufacturer in the world in 40 years is just wild.
It's super wild, and obviously that's a story of government investing and.
Well, that's kind of, isn't that what we're trying to do with our Chips and Science Act, right? Is that we're trying to basically say, hey, listen, we need to get some of this stuff happening on our land here, especially if we're putting these chips in our defense and our missiles and everything else that we've got.
Yeah, and just don't give stuff to China is basically that too. But anyways, so you have this classic story of this guy who changed everything. Okay, so this guy's name's Morris Chang. He was born in China. He grew up. He lived through 3 different wars. He bounced from China to Hong Kong to China to Hong Kong, and then eventually moved somehow during all that. Lived through World War I or World War II, which they call the Sino-Japanese War. It's basically World War II. The dude somehow gets to Harvard. Okay, somehow gets to Harvard and goes, they don't even have an engineering program. What am I doing here? Transfers to MIT, gets a mechanical engineering degree, goes and works for a company.
Texas Instruments.
Yeah. He worked. Yes, eventually he worked at a company before that. But yeah, he goes and works at Texas Instruments. Kind of a normal like entry level. Ends up rising pretty quickly through their chip manufacturing. His first client's IBM, and they're building chips for mainframes.
Oh, good Lord.
Okay, so this guy decides he's gonna he's going to change the game by introducing the concept of basically inverting the price curve. So what manufacturers used to do is and this was when computers were super expensive. I don't even know like the context of what IBM was selling these mainframes
and
for.
they were the size of rooms, I mean, they were just ginormous.
Right. And I don't know what their refresh cycle was, but they were designing
probably 30 years.
Yeah, I don't know. But the way that they would do that is they would basically tax their customers for new products. So they would go in, they would say, okay, you got to buy this new thing. It's going to be super expensive, and we're just going to raise our prices. So what cost $1 today now costs $10, and so they would do that, and that's how they would basically justify the investment on their end too. Anyways, he's basically like, you know what? Every single chip that comes out of this company, only 10% of them make it to market. Their failure rate on their chip manufacturing, and they weren't even chips at that point. They weren't even.
It was germanium and not silicon.
Yeah, it wasn't. Yeah, it was different technology.
Big
Call it a chip.
Steampunk.
90% of the stuff that they built failed, and he was able to basically get it up to 20%, which is what made him famous at Texas Instruments.
Mm-hmm.
But what they did was he said, the only way for us to get better is to iterate and improve over time.
Yeah.
And in order for us to iterate, we need more volume. And so what we have to do is lower our prices. That one idea has now cascaded through time. Go ahead.
Yeah, well, and I think I'll jump to the end a little bit. Sorry, but that idea is where the moat is in manufacturing, where if you iterate and figure out how to increase yield on these wafers, you make a lot more money, right? Like it's super expensive. You got this wafer, if only 10% of them are working at the end of it, and now you have 20%, and then you get to 30, and then that's really hard to just reproduce for another company because there's no substitution for the learnings when just going through the process, right? Like you can hire the engineer that did it, but at the end of the day, like that just takes time, and there's no real shortcuts to get to that.
And it's such an exact process.
Right?
Right?
Like literally, there's probably fewer processes that need to be as exact when you're dealing at 3 nanometers.
This is
So
manufacturing.
what the hell is that? Like, so when we talk about nanometers, you're talking about on these wafers or these chips or whatever, you have to install some sort of electrical
It's
device
the size of the transistor, right? So yeah, and the smaller the better, because the more you can jam into the wafer itself, and then you have all sorts of issues with that, because the smaller they go, the closer they get together, and there's heat involved in that, so they can be firing off their little neighbors. So like, it's a whole. Go ahead, Joel.
I mean, so just to put in context, we're talking 2-3 nanometer transistors. It's kind of like feature size. Some people say it's more of a marketing term, like 5G, 6G now, but it originally did. It's basically like how small stuff is. So like a little ant, 3 millimeter ant, like a little ant on your watermelons, 3 million nanometers. And guess how many are in a chip nowadays? Like an Nvidia chip. There's like 40, 50 billion easily. Human strain of DNA is 2.5 nanometers. And we're making chip parts, chip features that are that small. It's just like
so crazy.
Some people think it's literally the pinnacle of like human engineering is the microchip and where it's going. So it's hard to even wrap your head around. But
So this stuff is the hardest stuff in the world to build. So go back to Chang. All right. Mm-hmm. So Chang he's at Texas Instruments and he's kicking ass. Well, they put him over. Guess what's happening at the same time? They're building the frickin' TI-83 calculator.
Mm-hmm. Still got mine.
They still have those, right? They still have some.
We used to play. I used to play that.
Drug Wars.
Drug Wars.
Oh yeah, I was trying to explain Drug Wars to someone the other day, and they were like, "So you were like a video game about dealing drugs?" I'm like, "Yeah." And you're in middle school? Yeah.
I don't know how did we load those games onto that thing?
It was a whole process.
Mm-hmm.
Like,
you had a lot of nerd cred when you actually got it running. Everybody's like, "Whoa, look, you're
How
playing
did you
Doom."
load it though? You plugged it into someone else's calculator? I forget.
It was like a network effect. Like it was like someone had to pass down the data to you.
No, it was just like, how did any memes pass back before the internet?
Dude, how did any of that work?
No, the hamster and Richard Gere, right?
Oh yeah,
that thing.
The hamster dance.
Yeah. Well, no. Well, no. We're actually. I mean, I guess it's kind of a hamster dance. But,
not a hamster.
But the reality is, that thing spread across the entire United States, and we had no internet. And again, we're in Indiana, so we were always like 5 or 6 years behind the stories. But like how it landed here, how that stuff.
And that was like objectively false, right?
Oh, it was. Well, Maybe. Like, I still don't know.
I remember.
Anyway, so they moved Chang over to this consumer products division, and he absolutely takes a shit because he's not a
business.
consumer products guy. He's a chip manufacturing process expert. And so he fails. He ends up he's 55 years old, and he's actually, he goes to a couple different companies, and he's just kind of washed up at this point. Basically loses his job. Okay. So that
At 55?
and he puts open to work on his LinkedIn. Okay. Right. And the Taiwanese government approaches him, and they're like, we heard you're like pretty kick ass at building chips. They're like, we're starting this initiative. And he's like, I'm in. But they're like, hey, you got to go raise 50% of the money. We'll give you 50%. They get just FYI, the total initial investment to build TSMC was $228 billion.
In what year was?
1987 was when they
So
started.
that's like a couple trillion bazillion now.
We're not talking about some seed fund.
No.
Okay. We're talking about these guys knew the scale that that's why they.
So did the government put in $100 million and basically said you got to go raise another $100 million?
Billion, right?
billion.
Yeah.
Billion.
Yeah.
Fact check me, bitches.
Yeah. And this isn't a software company that has like a 5-year and it's like in 5 years it'll be a 10x or 100x or this is
Like, we don't even know.
Oh,
manufacturing.
by the way, it was 228 million, not billion. It was not billion, but still, back then that's still a ton of money.
That's still, yeah.
So fact check me. I fact check myself. Anyways, Philips of all people, the company Philips, I'm sure it's European. Puts 28%, and then they get the rest. So he gets the rest. He starts the company. Anyways, they start growing. They start growing their market share. But what they did is instead of designing and being an integrated manufacturing company, they just said
Pure play.
and explain the foundry concept.
So at the time, like Intel and AMD were designing chips and also building them. And it wasn't until the 90s when everyone started outsourcing manufacturing in pretty much every industry that they started outsourcing the manufacturing of the chips to Asia. But Chang was like, I'm going to just do pure play foundry and build chips. I'm not going to design them. I'm not going to try. I'm going to be available to any designer, and I'll do it cheaper than what Intel and AMD are doing it for in the US.
Think in the 90s, do you think when we did decide to start outsourcing a lot of stuff, if Intel and AMD, is AMD an American company?
Yeah.
Okay. If both of them decided, no, we're not going to outsource it and we're going to maintain it in-house, that would have, radically changed the entire future, because outsourcing it is ultimately what gave Taiwan all the power.
It is.
Well, yeah,
But you would have also been requesting the U.S. government to subsidize that.
Well, but at the same time,
because
we're now subsidizing it with the CHIPS Act.
You're
$50 billion.
assuming that they would have been successful.
That's
in
true.
that endeavor.
Yeah.
Because one company didn't do
issue.
that.
Right.
One company didn't split fab from or manufacturing from design. It's Intel. They still do it.
Okay.
And
Let's be honest. They're shit in the bed right now.
But do they not also have a ginormous opportunity to kind of reinvent? If they can get past some of the dogma that probably exists within an organization that's as old as that and as entrenched as that it seems like, especially with the CHIPS Act and the amount of money that the government's willing to give to get companies to do it, it seems like Intel is one of our best options as a country to be able to start producing these things in-house. And maybe there's some other players that are out there.
So let's just diverge then off that topic. So the reason why we're saying that is because essentially what's gone on, and we'll get back to the TSMC store because it's great and there's more to it. But essentially you have like 7 really big ass manufacturing facilities on the west coast of Taiwan. Okay. Well, guess who's over there about 200 miles away? China. Mm-hmm. Okay. So there is a huge geopolitical aspect of this, which is if the manufacturing capacity was dwindled down to zero because of a geopolitical issue, the entire world would stop on a top or a hat or whatever the phrase is, right? Because all of that manufacturing is going on in this area, and people think that Taiwan is claimed by China as a territory. U.S. recognizes Taiwan as an independent entity, right? China and Taiwan have this relationship, and it's basically the reason why Warren Buffett sold his shares of TSMC. He's like, I love the company. unbeatable. No one can compete with this company that does the most important thing for manufacturing in the entire world. But I sold my shares because I don't trust China.
Right.
Right. I'd rather see that happen in the United States. And so, we talked to one of our history buffs, and essentially you have like the biggest concentration of troops on the ground from a U.S. perspective anywhere in the world is all around there to try to secure these trade routes, to secure Taiwan, to secure basically what happened after World War II, right? They stayed.
Yeah. Just to put into perspective how important Taiwan is from a manufacturing perspective, I think it was 92% of all leading edge or what do you call that? Yeah, edge technology chips are produced in Taiwan that the U.S. buys. And then you said how many of the worldwide chips?
60% of the global market share of chips, which 60%. Is huge.
So it would be not a good situation for either side if that manufacturing went down.
Chaos. Like the tech industry would fall.
Yeah, and we know that because because there's so much value in this technology, it's embedded into everything. It's embedded into your toaster oven. Mm-hmm. It's embedded into your car's,
we would go back to toasters without Wi-Fi.
Right. Like I'm going to go and get a Pontiac Thunderbird, right? And I'm going to store it in my garage. So when the world ends, right, I've got this simple
I
engine,
can at least
right?
drive that
It doesn't have a Wi-Fi connection. I don't have Apple CarPlay, like my car, first world problems. My Tesla stopped charging, right? Yeah, it broke. It's done.
Really?
Yeah, but it comes with an 8-year battery warranty.
Okay.
But essentially, the other day I'm like, well, my car's not charging; it's broken. Like, and there's one repair facility in Indiana for Tesla, and you take it there and you go on the app. The only way to make an appointment with Tesla is through the app.
There's actually a lot of parallels there because one. You have less moving parts in your Tesla, so there's less likelihood to break. Same difference in one manufacturer. They can do things much more efficiently, right? But if something goes wrong, if they stop being able to produce it, if your battery breaks and you have to go to a Tesla a repair shop to fix it, you got to wait. Yeah. Things are going to be bad for a little while.
Yeah, and so literally the first appointment available was September 19th.
Shut up.
And so I'm like, well, I'm going to go ahead. Yeah, it's currently August 16th. This was August 10th probably. And so I literally, and this is just, advice, just show up. I just took it over there and was like, my car doesn't work. I need a car. So you're going to have to go ahead and get me an appointment right now.
Right.
And they were like, yeah, we will.
Oh, nice.
And they did a great job. Thank you, Tesla. But the parallels are real, right?
Because it's sole sourced. Bob's Auto Shop can't fix a Tesla. There's one company. It's an integrated supply chain. So you're it's like, it is a great analogy, honestly, that came up.
So back to why is there one company doing all this work, right? So anyways, you're back. So they start doing awesome. Chang retires in 2005. Okay. Well, guess what happens in 2008?
Oh, the whole crash.
Yep.
Yeah.
But what else happens? iPhone.
2007.
2007.
Yeah.
2008 crash. But at this point, guess who's making all the chips for iPhone?
I guess who turned it down?
Who?
Intel.
Did they?
Intel turned it down?
Yeah.
Not enough margin?
Jobs went to Intel and said, we're going to make this computer phone. This is like before it was even released.
Oh my God.
Do you want to be the chip manufacturer? And he's like, I don't know. He's like, we got Intel inside. They got, it was AMD and Intel going back and forth still.
They were trying to get around their computers.
God.
Yeah.
So
huge mistake.
So they just, but at the time, to put that in context, the personal computer was everything.
Yeah.
And no one
had anything.
The concept of a computer in your hand didn't make sense to anybody yet.
Yeah.
Except for the guys building fart apps making millions of dollars. They totally were dominating.
I had a friend, someone who went to my high school that made a bunch of money with that app that was just ringtones. It was early on ringtone.
I remember ringtones were big.
My P app actually made me some money.
Did it?
Yeah.
What was it?
What was it?
It was just called P, and it was for people that have pee shyness, and you could just drag a thing down, and it would just sound like you were peeing. So you had the sound of peeing, and it would make you pee.
That's
awesome.
awesome.
The whole thing. And literally, that's all it was. All it was is because I was going to be working on a native app, and I'm like, I always have to kind of go through a first app just to figure out all the nuances. And so I was like, I'm just going to throw together this P app.
How many sales did you get?
I have no idea. Like literally, I threw it up, and then all of a sudden I started getting purchases, and I'm like, Oh my God! Because I could still have just my name. I didn't.
Brandon's probably got $1 million.
It literally was like Brandon Corbin. Go P was the name of the app, and Brandon Corbin was underneath it. And that was when I learned, oh, you need to set it up as a company, and so your dumbass doesn't have your name associated.
I think it's funny that almost every week you just bring up something you built and like have generated revenue off of it. I'm like, what?
Yeah, that is, and I'm like, all right, shut it down.
All right.
So Intel, I did not know that. Intel turns down building chips for Apple. Apple goes to Samsung, and Samsung built the chips for the iPhones all the way through iPhone 5.
Damn.
So 2008, your boy Chang takes back over as CEO at like the age of like 78. Okay. And I think he's still now the chairman at 91 or some shit like that. So he comes back and he's like, we got to build these phones. We got to build these chips for these phones. So iPhone 6, Apple comes out with their first chip. They design it. TSMC manufactures it. And that changes the trajectory of the entire company. They go to the point where they're doing $40 billion on 50% profit margins, making $20 billion of profit a year, right? But now you have this situation where even to this day, all of Apple's chips are manufactured by TSMC.
And Apple is 25% of their revenue.
Damn.
Yeah, I mean, and you got to think like the leaps that Apple made with their M series chips were just absolutely astronomical. And now you have not Intel. Who's doing another one? Is it is it Firefly? One of the new chips? I think it's like the Nvidia ARM chip that they're starting to use in the new Windows laptops. Have you guys seen those? Like where they're really competing with the M.
Why is Windows so bad?
Well, we're going to clip that. That's going to be a good short. But what's interesting is the new ones that they're really kind of competing with the M1s. I mean, those chips are looking really, really impressive.
Really?
Like they're on point with the M series chips. And so I think that Microsoft is getting to that point where there's the new Surface Pro laptops are powered by these new chips. And I think they are AMD based. They're not Intel, or they're not X80.
So when I click the start menu, it's actually going to open?
Well,
when
yeah, but it'll probably be still full of ads.
Well, one thing that Apple did, which was smart, is they started designing their own chips. They built an in-house chip design, so they didn't need to rely on AMD or any other designer. They could get the talent, so they go straight to TSMC. They don't have like a designer. They do them. Whereas Windows has to make, you're talking about a lot of multi-purpose, like general purpose chips, right?
Totally.
They're not designed just for one piece of hardware. So it's hard to compare, and it's a little different,
well,
right?
And that's the reason. That's the fundamental reason why Apple was always so successful. Is Steve Jobs is like, hey man, we're making these products, and I need to understand this product, and I'm going to design this product, right? I'm not a software company.
It was always a product. Just like what we're seeing with the AI and the rollout of the AI stuff. The AI here is more of just, it's a feature-based AI versus being like, it's a new chatbot application, right? Like we're incorporating the features of AI into the overall product experience.
That goes back to the premise of why they may or may not be really successful in what they're doing. But for those who haven't experienced the leap from the Intel chip to the M1. If you bought an Apple device in the last 3 or 4 years, essentially, and you got one of the M series, I mean, there's a noticeable difference in performance, battery life.
Oh, it's ridiculous.
I mean, how many times did your fan? Remember our fans used to turn on?
Kick on all the time.
I mean, my battery life is way better.
Oh yeah, you can go all day with these with the M.
I'm even like, you used to have anxiety about not bringing your charger with you places. I haven't brought my charger with me. Now, part of it is it's a new battery, and my other computer was maybe a few years old. But
even then, compared,
compared new to new, if my memory is correct, this is way better. Yeah.
But so basically, we got to this point, and this is before the last couple of years. Is like you got to the point where those M chips, basically, you could just do whatever you wanted, and you were overpowered. Like you had so much computing power on your device that whatever you needed to do, you could do it. You didn't have to close out applications. Like you can run Docker, you can run, you do all your dev stuff. But now we get to this AI world, and the demand for this technology now, and the demand for improvement, like you said, 3 nanometers or whatever. Like that's the question now. Is like, okay, can Apple continue to design? Can Taiwan continue to manufacture? Or do we actually need to consider the fact that the current architecture is probably may or may not be able to even support what we're trying to
All
accomplish.
right, so I've actually got a question for you very specifically about this, because I have a feeling of what happens in this space, and it just shakes all of the traditional manufacturers to the core, and that's going to be the inclusion of biology. Right, that's going to be including. There's the brain on a chip stuff that people are working on, where they're trying to graph brain neurons literally on chips. There's ones where they're using brain cells as part of like a nano, chip thing. And what they're finding though is that anytime that we're starting to incorporate the biology side of things, all of a sudden our efficiency goes through the fucking roof, right? Because our brain runs on 20 watts of power, right? Like it's crazy how efficient Mother Nature has been. And I think the companies that are ultimately going to start leveraging that kind of stuff is ultimately going to win, because all of the old brothers who are still just pushing electrons around are not prepared at all for the biological side of things. Are you guys seeing anything? Are you hearing anything? Like what's happening? I think that's right. Space?
I mean, you've heard of Moore's Law, right? Gordon Moore, co-founder of Intel, said about every year the number of transistors will double. And that was true for decades. But I think that we are hitting that diminishing returns, right? Yeah, that's what they said. There's you'll get into quantum tunneling if you get past 2 nanometers, which is where we're almost at.
Sure.
So I think Moore's law.
What the hell is quantum tunneling?
I don't know.
All of a sudden, you're starting to pull resources from other universes for powering your computer and shit.
So I think if Moore's law is slowed down, and you're right. I think that's right. In existing architecture, existing kind of format, we're probably getting there. But they have to reinvent the manufacturing process to continue innovating at the same pace. Right. So I think there is going to be some kind of disruption at some point.
So there's this, and I keep trying to find the name of it, but there's specifically a company, and they're this startup, but still well funded, that they're literally using stem cells that are this kind of humanoid nodule cell thing. They have these 2 little black eyes on it. It's wild, man. And that they're able to go and process a huge amount of data. They've got an API that's available that you can actually use. It's super crazy expensive. And they have to worry about these things dying and replacing them. But they also get smarter because they're using a lot of the same brain synapses and stuff like that. The more that processes, the better it gets. And you can actually see its training. And that these things are actually getting better. I mean, that is wild.
I think the issue with those, long term, yeah, maybe. But the issue is just meeting the demand today.
Oh,
so
sure.
The H100, Nvidia's chip to the H200 is 40% more efficient at training a model and 20% less energy. And Intel's got one, and they're going to keep re-architecting and redesigning these chips to be more efficient, to do the task, these very specific tasks of training these LLMs, which is a relatively new task to do at this scale. Right. So while I do think that's a 2 or 3 decades down the road
absolutely.
situation, I think in the near term, you're just going to see a bunch of specific manufacturing chips there.
You give me an M3 chip and I can write code all day long.
Sure.
Right. I can do Adobe Photoshop. Right. I can send emails. I can have 70,000 tabs open in Chrome. Right. I can push the edge of the envelope. But the computing demand that we're headed to is beyond any scale that you could ever comprehend. And so you're going to hit that quantum tunneling limit, right? And so what happens is that you just create a demand for something that's never had demand, right? And so what do humans do? They build shit and they create it.
And
right?
who's the best at doing that too?
They're not going to be able to build a TSMC factory day one to manufacture that at scale. But the technology is coming that will disrupt that entire concept.
So here's what I would like to propose is that what we could do is we could actually start just creating a bunch of humans. We could just keep them in a vat, keep them kind of just plugged in, right?
I know where this is going.
We can use their energy, basically almost like a battery in a way, and we could use their brains as a processing unit.
Perfect.
Right?
Is that what they were doing in the Matrix?
But I think that's a great point about the next generation of technology. And if you look at the CHIPS Act, it was $280 billion over the next 10 years, but only 50 of it was for pure play manufacturing. Intel got 10 billion. We got a couple billion. 200 of that was for R&D, sciences, making sure that U.S. students and engineers are inventing that next generation. Because I think they're already seeing TSMC's got this generation of chips, and we're never going to catch up. But like, what's that next wave, and how can we protect that?
That's a good point, and I wanted to talk about the issues in the Arizona factory for TSMC.
Yeah, so TSMC diverts all their stuff's in Taiwan. That's where they do alert, but they diversified to Arizona.
Yeah, well, I mean, we paid them to.
They got chips funding. They got $6 billion in U.S. funding.
Yeah.
To basically go set up a plant in Arizona.
Three
and they
plants.
got there and they're like, this is really hot.
Well, yeah, they're like, it's too friggin' hot. No,
why are we here in the middle of the desert?
Well, Taiwan's pretty hot.
For manufacturing, you want access to water and cool weather. So why they picked Arizona?
I literally, we've got Alaska, guys.
Is it literally just? Wait, hold on. What are the issues in Arizona for TSMC's manufacturing?
So one of the issues is culture change. So the Taiwanese are very hierarchical, and basically they're like asking these manufacturing engineers, to come in like at the drop of a hat in the middle of the night, and us Americans were like, you're not paying me. That's not in my job description. So they're just having issues getting them to adhere to their processes and how they do things. And also they're asking a lot of Americans to go over to Taiwan for extended periods to watch how they do things. So I think the near-term solution is they are bringing over a bunch of their engineers to fill any gaps and to help smooth over the process, and then train, hopefully, to sustain this, because they don't have an unlimited.
Wasn't there a movie in the 80s with Michael Keaton that was this exact thing? Oh, we need to look this up. I swear.
Johnny Dangerously?
No, but there was, and it was a Japanese company came over, and Michael Keaton was in this movie. I'm totally having a flashback to what you just described was exactly a story.
I'm going to look it up. The Michael Keaton Japanese manufacturing movie.
The unions don't like this because they're like, hey, you said you were going to employ Americans, and now you're bringing over a bunch of non-Americans, and
they got funding for it from the U.S. government.
Yeah, so like. Yeah, it'll be interesting where
it's like the farmers, and have you seen these there's these YouTube videos going around right now where it's like farmers in Montana and like other areas like out in Utah and like kind of like where you're like, are there farms out there? And they're like, okay, so here's why we have to employ immigrants, because Americans that we've offered them benefits, $20 an hour, 401k, insurance, retirement packages, and guess how many people show up for the job?
Yeah.
0.
Yeah.
Because ain't no American that's in a 4th generation sitting on the couch lifestyle want this job because it's hard.
You said it earlier. Americans, we are very we're creative. We like to be our own bosses. We're pretty level playing field. There's there's hierarchy, but not a ton of it, right? It's pretty flat structure. Other countries, not so much, right? Like Japan and Taiwan, and they have pretty hierarchical cultures. So it's like, yeah, that makes sense. You go to work, your boss tells you what to do, you do it. You need to come in the middle of the night, you do it. The other issue that they're having is these clean rooms. Like, we just don't have a lot of experience.
We're dirty. We're a bunch of filthy animals.
We do a lot of dirty manufacturing. Yeah. We used to. That's where our roots came from. Right. But as far as clean room manufacturing, we just don't have a ton of experience with that.
What does that mean? What is a clean room manufacturing?
That just means you literally are. You've seen the
gown robe.
The head that you just absolutely no dust, dirt, grime, nothing can come into that room because these wafers are in there. I'm assuming.
Yeah, getting a little piece of dust.
Where do you think that? So that's part of what's kind of wrong with America. Mm-hmm. Like, where do you think the grit and determination from people in these cultures comes from? Is it from their parents?
I think it's very much cultural for them. For us, it's like that individual cowboy, we're American, we can go do this on our own and blah, 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 blah.
But also,
that's not how it always was, right?
Yeah, well, remember in World War II, we did a bunch of crazy shit because we were like, we're going to die if we don't do this. Right. And they we just don't have the driver underneath of you're gonna die if you don't figure out how to do this tough job.
Well, right? China's having that issue right now where I think that they're second, third generation factory worker family, their kids are out on TikTok and rapping,
and they're just not feeling
they're
it.
Like, I'm not doing this.
Right.
My friend went to college in Kentucky and loved it and partied and came back and was like, man, you don't have to live like this.
I don't know if you guys notice it too, though, during the Olympics, anytime that you had some of these Asian countries that were going out and they were in a group, those people were in lockstep. It was insane. Like just how well they were a fine, well-oiled machine. They would all come out. They'd be like going in like robots. And I mean, they were just completely, then you had Americans coming out. Everybody's just like their own individual rock star, all this stuff. It was kind of wild. And
well, there's pros and cons to
absolutely.
that, right?
Yeah,
and like
totally.
when you're talking about manufacturing where it's like, you need to be robotic. Actually, robots are better at this. That's why they replaced a lot of those jobs. But you have to be robotic. You have to do exactly what you're told all the time.
Yeah.
So
There's
the
no room for
only reason
creativity.
that they moved manufacturing to Arizona is because to diversify their geopolitical risk.
Yeah,
it'd have to be.
Yeah, it's not a financial, and like it's a long-term stability move, not there makes no sense
It's
to
not going to
manufacture
work.
here.
No. Well, it might. Gung Ho was the movie, by the way, with Michael Caine. 1986.
Yeah.
So that's going to tell you I was 10 years old.
Sean, it'll work in the sense that it's going to take a while for them to acclimate, and like they're going to have to learn more about how we work. We're going to have to learn more about how they work.
Yeah.
Prices may have to come up a little bit. Like there's going to be compromises to me because it's worth it. Because why? We don't want to be 100% dependent on Taiwan. So
But we have to. I mean, like as a country, we have to not be 100%.
and that's part of
reliant
you
on
said 200 billion of that money is going towards research development, and I'm sure there's clean room labs getting set up in high schools and colleges across. That's just got to be a part of it. So,
But what you guys are just saying brought something up. Like, who do you think ultimately is responsible for the situation we're in today? Is it because Apple knows they're getting all of their chips from one single supplier in a geopolitical hot zone on the ring of fire? They know there's risk. Are they actively like trying to diversify their supply chain? I don't know. It doesn't seem like it right now.
Well,
they have so much money.
Warren Buffett sold all their shares in TSMC and Apple.
He did sell all of his Apple.
Oh, sorry, 50% of their Apple, which was like they owned more shares than any insider at Apple. Like
I will say what Apple has done an impressive job in being able to do some pretty dramatic shifts, right? Like just being like, all right, we're killing Intel. We're going to go with AMD, right? And we're just going to make that move over the next 2 years. So they do seem to have a pretty pliable ability to make those types of changes. So if they had to, I think, like we were talking about with Windows, they have to serve so many different masters where Apple really is just serving a bunch of hipsters, right?
I want to learn more though about like Apple and other big tech's role in like disrupting the supply chain, because you're right. For pure profit play, yeah, of course they should go to the biggest manufacturer in the world who can do it at the lowest cost and they don't have to worry about it,
Yeah.
But like other than like it'd be good for America and it'd be good for like global stability. What could they make a argument that they could make more money if they controlled, like go the Intel route? Or
I just think it's more like they're clearly sourcing all this stuff from TSMC and from Taiwan because there's demand. They're making tons of money. They're trying to push product and ship product and advance and innovate. But no, like I don't know if they've like stopped and thought like, I don't know. It's just like one of those questions. Like who's ultimately accountable for it?
There's a simple answer to this question. No one can do what TSMC can do. No one. Not even close. Can't do it. Can't do it. Can't do it. Like if Apple wanted to build the M4 chip and ship all these iPads, and they just couldn't do it without
Is it a similar?
So they have to take the risk.
It's a similar concept to what Tesla did with the car industry, right? Like, but only maybe even more entrenched, harder to get into. Because like car manufacturing, Toyota has owned car manufacturing. Like the big car makers, they've been doing it for a long time, and they have worked out a lot of the kinks, and their precision is unrivaled.
Good point.
Tesla's precision
It's
has
not really
been
good.
questionable.
And they're not diversified. You're right about Toyota. Toyota diversified their supply chain. I mean, they got factories in America.
Well, let's go back to like their TSMC is unstoppable. Like for now, yes. But I think you're seeing like Intel. So ASML we talked about makes those extreme ultraviolet lithography machines that make the AI chips. They make 5 of those machines a year. That's all they can put out, and they cost like $400 million. But guess which company bought all 5 of the 2024 machines? Intel.
Yeah.
So what we're saying is everyone just came home from 20 years of just absolutely stacking money and looks like okay, wait, what's going on? TSMC's got $20 billion of profit a year. All right, let's rethink this. Let's reinvest
It was the
Right.
chip shortage that woke everyone up. I
Yeah,
think.
yeah. Everyone, it's an awakening.
Yeah.
There's an awakening
Your house
happening.
catches on fire. Should I get insurance?
No one even probably thought about semiconductor supply chain until they're like, I can't get a car for how long?
Yeah, because
Yeah.
I can't. But the radio's not ready.
I need chips.
But I still, I think my biggest struggle with this entire thing is thinking that you're going to grow American manufacturing. I just don't think it can happen. I think we're literally France. I think we're Spain. I think we're a 4th, 5th, 6th generation working from 9 to 2 p.m., take a siesta culture at this point. I think that the Americans have that
ship
are
has
college.
sailed.
I think we're all fucking mailing. I think everyone's
but,
fucking mailing it in.
I'll counter that argument with if we really wanted to invest the money into doing the thing. What you're saying is we don't have the manpower at the cost required to do it the way they are currently doing it.
I don't.
If
I
we
agree.
innovated,
That's what I'm saying.
Yeah, I agree with you.
I
think it would go ahead.
I was going to say, if we lost the power grid, I think all of a sudden American would step up and our cowboy roots would actually pan out for us, and we'd be willing to get dirty.
They
we're
need
just
something to
so
galvanize.
we're so covered.
But is it past the
oil.
point of no return?
No, you're right though. That's so what it all comes down to. The whole CHIPS Act's really probably it's economic and being more competitive, but it's ultimately about national security.
Yeah.
Military weapons, power grid, being ahead so that if anything does go bad, we're not relying on
Exactly.
Asia, China, South
Right.
Korea. Literally, that's all probably the White House and the Capitol they're thinking about.
I really do think, though, that as a country, we are one catastrophe away from being united, right?
need
And
that.
that it's going to suck. It's going to be painful. People are going to hate it because, again, we like our overpriced, Bigley coffees or your venti, whatever the hell that thing is. Like, we like our cushiness. We like our comfort. We like all that. However, we have shown that Americans are absolutely willing to not be comfortable, willing to build some amazing shit, and willing to go forth.
I agree, and also all the political shit that goes on, all that noise.
Ugh.
I look at it and I laugh sometimes because
Right.
I'm like, if we had to unite, when the towers got hit,
Right.
all of a
Exactly.
sudden everyone's just like same page.
Yeah,
fuck 'em.
totally.
Yeah.
Let's. I mean, we maybe made the wrong choice, but
Right.
but we still
we got
immediately
behind it.
aligned
Totally.
with.
I hope that that's true.
Right.
Yeah.
I do. I think either that or we
It
just
sure
need.
was in 2001.
It was. We just need. Maybe what we need to do is we need to basically airdrop wolves and lions across all major cities, right? Just cover them and basically make everybody have a fear for their life and their safety. And then all of a sudden we're all unified.
did you see
if
that?
we're all running down the damn street from a lion, guess what we're not yelling about? Oh, it's Trump or Kamala, blah, 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 right? We're just running from the lion.
Did you guys? So, I sent you that video
Yeah,
on Instagram.
yeah.
So there was the guy that does free. What's it called when you climb? You
Free
climb
solo.
Free
He
solo.
did El
Free solo guy.
Capitan or
So he's
whatever.
on this podcast. So Free Solo, he basically climbs the hardest.
Alex Honnold or
Yeah.
whatever.
Yeah.
Yes.
Have you ever
Without
seen his eyes?
anything.
The guy's got the biggest eyes I've ever
He's like
seen
an
in my life.
owl.
He's crazy, but he's on this podcast, and I sent it to Jake because it's a motivational thing. So he's on this podcast, and he's like, people need to fear for their lives.
Yeah.
They need to fear something because if you don't have visceral fear in your day-to-day life, or maybe week to week or month to month or year to year, life, what happens is you start sweating the small things.
Yeah.
Right?
Totally.
And he's like, I think that fear, danger style fear is one of the more important emotions that you can experience.
Yes.
And he's like, I'm at an airport and people are worried about the delay and the 3 hours. He's like, you have abundance right now. You can go to McDonald's, Burger King, you have a bar, and you have your computer, it's air conditioned, and you're sitting here worried about a 3 hour delay. Who gives a shit if you're 3 hours late? He's like, go experience the fear of if I lose a grip, I'm going to die.
Look, everyone freaked out about the whole CrowdStrike thing. Like I couldn't order my Starbucks ahead of time. I was like, this is every store. I was like, something's wrong. Like
So bad.
So, and maybe governments understand that and they there's obviously something that needs to happen, but there
lions
is
and
this
wolves.
paradigm right now where our culture is not necessarily prepared to kind of get their hands dirty and build the things that we need to build because we realize that we're building it in a place where all these people have made generational sacrifices to do these things and build these things. And
but it's a catch-22, right? Because they did that so that the next generation didn't have to do that.
Yeah, it's
we are
hard
the
times.
next, we are the next generation.
Hard times make hard men. Soft times make soft men. Whatever that whole
and you don't want to. You would never wish a bad thing to happen to someone unless you're Brandon and you want wolves to be deployed.
I want them to run. I don't want them to get eaten.
Okay. So, but like, manufacturing fear, which we already kind of do, but for the wrong kind of shit, right? Like that's not really, but I hear what the point is like, we do need to figure out like, all right, what can we rally around? What actually matters? And I think the other side of that, aside from getting yourself out there and doing things that challenge you, maybe it's dangerous. Maybe it's just something that's outside of your comfort zone. Go experience new things. Like people are so stuck in, and we're all guilty of it. 100%. We have our comfort zones. Like that is what, if we're going to get unstuck in this world of like, I'm worried about the transgender taking a piss in the back, like oh, that really bothers me. Yeah. Oh no, you better get that on short. But like, we gotta go learn a little bit more. We gotta experience some shit.
100%, dude. 100%.
Yep. Well, I think that sums it up pretty well.
Yeah.
So, we learned that today that Brandon built a P app.
Yeah.
So if you have P anxiety,
there's a name for it too. Apparently, that whole thing.
I'm sure there
I
is.
thought it was going to be an app about finding the nearest toilet.
So that's actually not a bad idea. Like the best clean toilet that you can find. Like
someone in New York did it. It was like for pooping or whatever.
Right.
Yeah, but
that's my favorite thing in Seinfeld is like. George knew where all the greatest spots to do number 2 was. Like he knew all the, or was it? I think it might have been Kramer.
I have no idea.
Like that definitely came from real life experience. But if you didn't understand how brittle this entire universe is, I hope that today you learned something. And there's opportunities galore. And if you're young and you're in college, go get a degree in electrical engineering.
No, dude, totally.
Go learn about learn about AI.
So
learn about neural networks. Learn about LLM. Learn.
Right. So let me just throw this out there that there is right now the National Electricians Consortium of America, whatever, the NECA. They basically have to hire 500,000 electricians over the next 5 years. Right. And they're having a real hard time finding electricians. So if you are a college kid right now, or if you're just not exactly sure what you want to do, consider doing an apprenticeship at an electrician place. You're going to get paid. They're going to pay for your education. You're going to learn a valuable skill that's not going to be replaced by AI anytime soon. And that's going to be, you're like electricians right now, like when you become like a journeyman or even a master, you're making like 150, 160, 170. And you're making good money.
There's huge opportunities too. Like I think like the trades were looked down upon for a long time. Totally. It was like you have to go to college or else you're just not good enough.
Right.
But like think about all the things that are dependent on electricians.
Oh,
right?
God.
Like and all of our infrastructure.
Totally.
If you want a new building, you want a substation, you want to connect this shit, gotta call an electrician.
Exactly.
And even big money.
Like doing the green stuff, it still requires like solar and wind and all of it.
Solar panel. You want to put solar panels on the roof?
And to tie that back to the semiconductor industry, all these companies are building these fabs because of this government funding, and there's a huge labor shortage. There's not a lot of people that really are experts in building high-end manufacturing plants. So you're bringing people over from Asia, you're paying them double the rate. They're sort of just moving around, and it's just
I got bad news for everybody, but it's also good news, which is this is a reflection of reality. There are so many people chasing blue collar entry level jobs right now that went to college to go be a blue collar finance marketing person. Even people like us, lowly developers, right? And honestly, it might be the wrong move. Like if you're in high school right now, go to McKinsey, go to the trade center and get a skill, because I think that might be a better use of your time to get foundational skills than
McKinsey Consulting.
Because blue collar jobs are going to be done by AI in 10 years.
Yeah. And if you're going to do it, and you have a lot of drive, go get a degree in entrepreneurship too. Then add while you're at it. Because
exactly. Then go start a plumbing business or electrical business.
If you could get the skills to be an electrician, and then 5 or 10 years after you've learned the trade, go start a business, you'll probably be a millionaire by the time you're 40.
How many unhappy carpenters have you ever met?
That's true.
You know what I mean?
That's a really good point.
Building stuff is just the
fun.
funnest
It
thing
totally
ever.
is.
My grandfather was a carpenter. My dad was a carpenter, but he was an accountant. Like building stuff and doing all that. I mean, it's just the most fulfilling thing in the world.
People always make fun of me because like I don't like to hire people to do DIY projects.
He literally will hire no one. He'll beat them up.
I like to build everything.
Exactly.
And
I'm
it
the
takes
same
me
way.
twice as long,
Yep.
and it's
It's-
normally not as good.
It's about 80% of
We just justify, X everything out. We just justify he's going to fire all his contractors.
No, but I have a ton of projects, and I did hire a bunch of contractors because even there's some projects that are too big for me. But
Right.
no, but it is a lot of fun to work with your hands, and like
Totally.
I think the issue becomes like if you're doing the labor stuff and it's hard on your body, and that's not a long term. There are some long term issues there, but
All right, America, step up. It's not going to be me, but hopefully you do.
Next gen, please.
This has been the Big Cheese AI podcast. We really appreciate Joel for hanging out today.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
And just side note, Joel is the drummer in our band Prestige Worldwide. So look us up on Instagram, Prestige Worldwide Music.
That's right.
We're trying to get to 100 followers before we apply for Tonic Ball. So hopefully you guys.
What do you guys
Nice
got?
plug.
We're at
67?
Hell yeah.
Joel is the head of what is it?
That's in a week. That's in a week.
That's good.
Black leather gloves.
Black leather gloves. You guys obviously haven't seen Step Brothers. And yeah, we need to get to 100. So we got rejected last year. But yeah, we appreciate you guys coming out. Check us out. Like, subscribe on YouTube. We need to get to 500 subscribers as soon as possible. Thank you guys.
Let's do it.